I'm going to tell you the story about an old friend of mine, John Raslik, and I'm modifying his last name just a little bit out of respect for him. He was a private man, and after you hear the story, you'll understand why that is. I don't have any pictures of John. I actually did try to take one time, and it's weird because photographs are commonplace now, and people take selfies of people with other people that they meet and whatnot. Well, we didn't really have that technology at the time I met John. And I did try to take a picture of him one time with an old 35mm camera at a shop, and he got very defensive and says, why you take a picture? And he had a little bit of quite a bit of broken English. He was Hungarian. He was from the country of Hungary. And like I said, you'll understand more as the story goes along. So I don't have any pictures of John. And that's okay. We can tell a story anyway. I met John in the year 2000. I was expecting my first child, my first son. And after the initial shock, and as any kind of first-time dad, I guess, would experience, and then it became, I'm like, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be cool, man. And I started thinking about something to mark that date. How could I historically mark that date and maybe have something to give him later on in his life? And about the time in the mail, the kind of junk mail, those little flyers that advertise windows and mattresses, which are on sale. Mattresses are always on sale. Anyway, in this junk mail flyer, there is a little thing from a coin company. And if you buy, I don't know what it was, a new golden dollar, you get the Susan B. Anthony dollar with it from 1999, and then the new golden dollar from 2000. But that marked the date, and I fell for this, and I bought some of them. I was like, it'd be cool to have a coin to mark the date of the birth of your son, and give it to him later in life. Anyway, I met John. John was a coin dealer, and he had a little shop, I guess you'd call it a store, inside of another antique store. And he just ran his little business, and I met him because I didn't know anything about coins, and I'd bought these. I took them with me. They weren't worth nothing, a couple bucks or something. And so I went in there wanting to know about these, maybe a little bit of the history or whatever. And John took the time to explain it to me. And he told me that this company they've been around a long time, but they're not. They enroll you in this club. They send you these high dollar coins. I couldn't afford any of that stuff, And if you didn't want them, you had to send them back and pay the shipping. It was just a mess. And he showed me how they overgraded their coins, how to kind of grade a coin, and all the stuff that I didn't know, it was really interesting. Over time, John became a friend of mine. And mind you, he's in his little shop. There aren't a lot of people that collect coins. It's a very niche market. It never has been a huge thing. So John's got all day in his shop. He doesn't really need to work. He's pretty financially set, very, actually. But he liked it. That was his hobby. And he would buy from people, and that's what a lot of his foot traffic was. And of course, he sold. And every time someone would come in his little shop, he always adjusted his hat down like this. And if they were looking through the little glass displays, he'd be doing paperwork or whatever, and he'd glance over at them, real skeptical. Always. And I'll explain why. So over the course of time, I obviously got to know John. He got comfortable with me. We got on a first name basis. And every time I'd walk in the store, he didn't adjust his hat. He'd say, Mike, my old friend Mike. A little bit short guy, John was. And pretty funny guy, Very staunch supporter of the Second Amendment in America, which is the right to keep and bear arms. There's also a reason for that. So he was always carrying, plus he's carrying a lot of money around. He's a coin dealer, so he'd have a briefcase. At any given time, he might have $40,000 in cash in that thing, plus the valuable coins. Plus he's got his shop with a lot of easily $200,000 at any given time worth of merchandise or more. So he has his reasons that he needs defense at all times. Anyway, so over the time, I got to know John. I got to know his story, and he was from Hungary and born there. And over time, I'm just like, how'd you end up in America? Clearly the man still spoke Hungarian at home to his wife, and but he knew English. It was a little bit broken, and sometimes he'd struggle for terms, words, and stuff like that. But how did you end up in America? And he told me the story. And the story is vitally important. So John was born in Hungary, grew up as a young man in Hungary. And this is post-World War II. And the Soviets took possession of Hungary as part of the Warsaw Pact. It was like a counterbalance to the NATO alliance. Big struggle for power. Well, we know how the Soviet regimes did. Everything was skeptic. Everything was watching. Everything. What did you say? Who did you say it to? Because, when you're malicious, you're skeptical of everybody because you're the one doing wrong, so you assume everyone else is too. We all know that. And I think that was a lot of John's skepticism because he grew up in that as a very young man. He watched it happen. And it was kind of ingrained in him as a way of life. Maybe he couldn't trust just anybody. And that marked John. Obviously, it became part of his deal for the rest of his life. Before the Soviet takeover, there was a group of men, and I have to be careful with my words here because of, censorship and whatnot. This group of men, there's two types of this group. One part is devoutly religious. I have no problem with that. Then there's another part that seems to be in high-ranking positions in areas of finance and business worldwide. Wear tiny hats on the back of their head. And he watched this group of men come in, and they bought up everything. Now, we were under Soviet rule in Hungary, and they didn't have any money. So this group of men is coming through. They're buying everything, junk, old broken hand shovels with broken handles, or bicycles with the missing tire. The money was the forint. I don't know the equivalent of the exchange, so I'm just throwing out numbers here. But the fact that they would buy it, and these people had no money, I'll give you $7 for that bicycle. And they're like, the tire's missing, the chain's gone, you can't ride it. That's okay. Broken wheelbarrows, junk, trash, everything that they could lay their hands on. They bought it all. And very shortly after that, the Russians came and took over everything. Then they had nothing. Well, this group of men that wore little hats on the back of their head all of a sudden had that stuff to sell. They didn't fix it or repair it. It was the same junk they'd get, except now it was $29 or whatever the equivalent of. John saw all that, and it marked him. So as he grew older, grew up into a young man, a horrible way of life, terrible poverty, and there was no hope. The Soviets were in control of everything. And his best friend that he had grown up with, they started talking about it, and maybe there's an escape here we need to be thinking about. The trouble with that is, as we know, any great country or regime always puts a limit on who can come and who can go. There was no escaping. You had to sneak out. So they were thinking about it. It was kind of, a loose idea, a rough idea, but it was a very serious idea. What would be involved in such a thing? And then his best friend's wife, they had 2 small children. The Soviets took his wife. They didn't have to explain why. They didn't have to have good reasons or anything else. It was just, you are an enemy of the state and you're under arrest. And they just took her, and she never came back. This isn't like America where there's this court system and you can find out information. She's gone. They took his wife, the mother, and of 2 small children. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and his friend told John, we have to go. We have to get out of here. John's like, where are we going to go? We'll go to America. They're free in America. I've heard. I remember my parents told me they're free in America. We'll go to America. Well, it wasn't a simple matter to get out of the country. Now, it wasn't just John and his friend that were feeling this way. The whole country was pissed off and tired of living under this Soviet regime. And they just naturally started to revolt, all of them. Massive uprising and a revolution. On November 4th, 1956, the Soviets crushed the Hungarian Revolution. Tanks and, you name it, it was going to stop. I think it was about 3,000 Hungarians were killed. During this time, 200,000 refugees over, a certain amount of time fled the country. And John and his friend were like, now's our chance. We go now or we don't go. The Soviets had taken all their weaponry. So John and his friend had a pair of makeshift homemade brass knuckles and a machete, a chopping knife for brush. And that was more for some effort at self-defense, better than nothing. That's all they had. And so they took that. There was the matter of these two infant children, or not infant, but very young. Children make noise, not the best things for escaping. And there were mines around the border of Hungary. In case you had the idea of escape, you get blown up. And you know how kids like to wander. So this is going to be a hike. I can't remember the exact distance that him and his friend went through, but it was more than, I think, 14 miles. And they had one overnight shot at getting it right. So they pick a date. And it's still a matter of the kids. And they came up with the idea of the Hungarian version of sleeping pills. And they feed them to the kids to knock them out. So one each, John and the friend, take these children over the shoulder and make this hike in the middle of the night. Every step, a near-death experience, because you don't know if you're stepping on landmine. It's dark. You're not going to have a flashlight to guide your way. They're sweating bullets every step, the anxiety, the distance of the travel, and you're carrying an infant on your arm. It's not like you can stop and take a 2-hour break, and rest. 14 miles minimum on foot, carrying, at least 40 pounds, 30, 40 pounds, a kid. They get to near the end of this. If we just keep on, we can make it. Freedom, man, we can make it. We just keep on. They're motivating each other. Near what they assume was the end, they come up with a guy in a trench coat, a military uniform. And he's got a full machine gun under the... Stop. Who are you? Where are you going? And they say, we're nobody. And we want to go to freedom. And there was a very tense standoff. And the guy with the machine gun turned and pointed the way. And he said, you have 1 mile. You go straight. Straight as an arrow. You don't veer left or right because it's loaded with landmines. And when you crest that ridge, you'll see the mountains and you'll know that you've made it. You better hurry up. The sun's coming up. And they double timed it, man. Each of them, thank you. Fast as they could. And they made the ridge. And they made the bordering country. And they saw it. And they got help. There was a lot of confusion and this and that. And they'd filling out paperwork. And first they went to Canada. And there was a hang-up. I'm a little unclear. John was very, broken English and stuff. And they couldn't come directly to America. There was a vetting process. Now, 30,000 of these Hungarians eventually did come to America and make it. John's friend never made it to America. He was actually hung up in Canada because he was in the Hungarian version of what we would know as the Boy Scouts when he was a kid. In any kind of political group or affiliation, the United States was incredibly skeptical of that, and he couldn't qualify, couldn't make it in. John could and did. Now, this is not the end of the story, but we're coming on 15 minutes here. And if you're still watching by now, I appreciate it, number one. Number two, I'm going to have to split this up because it already takes forever to upload a video where I live at. So this will be the end of part one. I'll try to upload part two within a few hours because I missed last week. Don't think I forgot about you. Anyway, I think it's an interesting story, so we're going to do a part 2 of this. And appreciate you watching if you do, and hopefully you catch that second part. See you in a bit.